Thank you so much for joining us today on Conscious Conversations. Today we're talking about elevating our creative consciousness. My name is Lauren Douglas. I'm the SVP of Marketing at Channel Factory, and I'm here with Shingy. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Hang on, this is Conscious Conversations?
Yeah.
Oh shit, I had no idea. I'm Shingy. I'm having a conscious conversation with Lauren, and I get to be able to look at trends and ideas and distill them down and hopefully clarify where the opportunities are and just shine a goddamn big light on them. So
Love it. Thank you for coming.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Ripper.
You just talked to me about a talk that you gave about up-leveling your consciousness. Is that how you referred to it?
Yeah, and also capturing creativity and the power of it.
Yeah.
Because I think what's interesting, if you look back at 22, maybe 21, all the funky noise was around Metaverse.
Yes.
God bless, which is just immersive technologies, blah, blah.
Yes.
Thank you, Meta. Whatever. But what's really interesting is, this Web3, Metaverse-y, out-of-body experiences. And then, of course, the last 10 years, it's all been about intelligence. And AI has been at the top of everyone's minds.
Yep.
And now it's actually just arrived in a form factor that others can access. Although it's happened a lot already because of transparent interfaces, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's now able to be consumerized.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is a lot of software is actually, what would be considered enterprise software is accessible by consumer.
So we were just talking about ChatGPT.
Right.
Yeah.
Whoop-dee.
Yeah.
But we're seeing, and it's been, those sort of technologies have been there for quite some time, but now they're democratized, means these tools are democratized, which also means there's more homogenized content out there. A la TikTok has a vibe.
Yeah.
If everyone's in a thing and, hey, here and there. Green screening and everything's sort of wobbly around them. And it's all, straight to view and, and then the musical side of it's about authenticity and other people listening in, and it's kind of creating community. And then Instagram is still about being polished, and LinkedIn is about being buttoned up, and Facebook is about being old school. And there's these things happening.
Yeah.
And it's all starting to sort of mature. But what I do think is interesting, particularly with the rub of AI, and because I think most people are thinking it's a rub. They're seeing the advantages and the disadvantages of it, which is true for any emerging technologies.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Out of that chaos becomes this incredible creativity, which also means you need to sharpen the tools. So as we also think about the climate changing potentially, I do think that what's going to happen over the next course of 12 to 18 months, people are going to sort of change the way they think about things that would have been innovative and maybe do less of it, which also means there's more opportunity for creativity because the tools are restricted.
Yeah. And do you think that's partly because of the economy, or you think that's sustainability plus economy equals dialing things down?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I mean, it's a perfect storm, I think. The economy part is just making sure that, while things are being rationalized, these platforms that are taking a backseat, potentially, allow others to explore better creativity. And those who are being super creative means things are becoming so homogenized. How do we actually make sure there's a new creativity around it? Yeah. And we're right at that point of saying, well, if these other platforms are old school and something that emerging is new school doesn't know what it wants to be when it grows up, that's a perfect platform for creativity. Yeah. And so given that, when I talked about sort of wanting to understand what that means, what's the elevating the creative consciousness is just making sure that you're aware of it, that the tools of that creativity arouse and the human, and technology can participate in it, but it doesn't have a consciousness. Right. So we do. Right. So given we do, you can make the expressions and the discussions and certainly the answers of, if the technology is telling me what to do, it's not telling me how to do it. Right. That's my job. Right. So how do I sharpen those tools? And I think about that all the time.
Well, and it's interesting because the technology is, at this point, able to make paintings and music, and I don't know if that's, or in poetry, and I don't know if it's good music or paintings or poetry, but like, I guess your thesis is you still need to have human beings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Well, to do things, one, to react to it. So when you look at, and I do think that there are, wonderful marketing plans happening out there to get everybody to AI themselves. I'm a walking, talking avatar already. I don't need a machine to come up with other drawings of me. I've got them already. Right. That the machine will never draw. Right. But there are algorithms to say if you want something stylistic. But that's been around for forever. Yeah. They're called filters. Yeah. Snapchat filters were the original. Or, run programs that we've created that allow you to do these shortcuts that says, here's all the 50,000 things you're going to do to make that thing look like an oil painting. It can be done quickly because it's learning the algorithm of a collective group of community, and it happens quickly, then we feel like it's a creative expression that's taken nothing. So if it's done that, that's great. What else can I do with that time?
Yeah.
But I would argue still that you need to create something radically. By the way, all of those things look the same. They're just the person who's in it is different.
Right.
But they all render very similarly.
Right.
And it's a bit like, whatever, dude, it's a bit naff.
Yeah.
It's a bit cold.
Yeah.
When you look at AI build an ad, or you look at AI write poetry, or if you look at AI write music, it's getting really good.
It is.
But I actually prefer when people sit down and actually play things.
Yes,
or they get down
of course.
So the craft is going to be important. So
yes.
that sharpening of the human tools, I think there's an opportunity to be much sharper than we've seen them before, because you can outsource it to this laziness, which creates that homogenization.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about this, are you thinking from the point of view of like the public, the consumer writ large, or are you thinking of the point of view of like creative in media and in ads and in, what we do?
I think it's all blending. Because if the consumer could be the person who amplifies the brand, that somebody can't actually think about what they would have done anyway, and that's why we have somebody who has influence that does it.
Right.
Because they're using these tools to say, I've done 10,000 versions of this bloody thing, how do I make it feel more magical?
Yeah.
And so it's a very different paradigm than, agencies could learn that, but this is the time to do that as opposed to outsource it all. So I think it's all of it. Because I don't separate them. They're all the same to me.
Right.
And a lot of people that consume brands are also wanting to be an expression of that brand. So are these tools helping them? Probably.
Right.
But the brands themselves they've been lazy. They need to be much smarter about how they actually want to emulate this.
Right.
I mean, look at the rubbish, and not to bring it up because I'm sure you've talked about it 10,000 times, Balenciaga, what a vomit.
Right.
How completely off color for a brand that was, what a beautiful name, Balenciaga.
Right.
And to turn around and just pillage that thing in a way that makes, I would never wear it.
Yeah.
Ever again.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many other brands that I think are just way more in tune.
Yes.
And it took them forever to apologize. It's like, oh, actually, we blamed everybody, but the truth is it was us. That's completely off color. But what they were trying to do was express their brand differently in a crowded place. And Balenciaga versus Gucci is kind of the discussion that really needed to be happening. Because everybody's waiting for them to fall.
Right.
But the truth is, the way that they approached it was just completely off.
Right.
So they had the tools, they just executed on it badly.
Right.
In that instance, they should be just course correcting, creating a lot more interesting ideas that could be tested and then amplified if they start to work, as opposed to a high polished idea. It emulates everywhere. It doesn't work. They've got to pull it back. They have nothing to replace it with. It feels like it's an expression of the brand, and so it's a mess.
Right.
Which becomes a massive opportunity.
Yeah. And so is that because there's a lack of creative consciousness? Is that because there's a lack of creativity right now?
Yeah, I think so.
So these directors, these creative directors are just, maybe they're afraid of losing their job, and so they're afraid of like trying something new or going outside the box or having a real POV, and so it gets watered down into this idea.
Yeah.
Or what do you think is behiund that, I guess?
More is more is
Yeah.
behind that.
Okay.
And we're in a popularity contest. I mean, it used to be, remember, back in the day, I've been reflecting on this recently because I'm concerned that, when we have a computer, it has memory. It doesn't have a memory.
Right.
It has a storage, and we happen to call it memory.
Right.
So we're trying to create this sort of connection to this thing. But I was also thinking about, back in the day, you would have a circle of friends.
Yeah.
And you have a circle of friends today. It's probably relatively small. And you have your social footprint. There's a circle of friends. And then suddenly you had followers.
Yeah.
That was very different than friends.
Right.
And then suddenly followers have become friends.
Right.
But we're still in this popularity contest.
Yes.
And so there's this more is more mentality.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of gross.
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
I don't think it doesn't necessarily mean I have a deeper empathy for a brand or affiliation for a brand because it has more followers. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for more value.
Yeah. I feel the same way about creators as well, or creative people, or artists, I guess you could call them, is if you start from the place of the external circle of wanting to win the popularity contest, it's always going to be self-serving and it's never going to feel good. It's never going to be inspirational art. If you start from the place of yourself, and you're creating that art and you're pushing that art into the world because that's the art you needed to create, then maybe that circle of followers, that circle of friends, that circle of people are going to be able to react to that art. But if you're doing it from the other way in, and you're trying to please people and make art backwards. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And also what's interesting, Lauren, is I think there's a greater space for PR to be a proper marketing channel. I mean, it has been forever. My God, Edelman's proven that. But I don't think it doesn't have a seat at the very front of the table. It tends to be, here's the idea, go find out where it can work.
Okay.
There are already channels, and for 10 years, and you and I know each other well enough, but for 10 years I've been saying that niche is the new mass.
Yeah.
So let me explain and defend that for a second.
Okay.
So 2 things. One, there's a lot of places and touch points where people can have these communication tools, and that's why PR should be at the front of the seat.
Yeah.
Period, full stop. It's very different to marketing, but it should be within the marketing chamber. It's very different. And that should be brand-led. And then the flip side of that is, people are like, oh, the trajectory and growth of TikTok is incredible to watch. Yeah, it is. But it's in niche ideas.
Right.
So if you want to learn how to cook, it's really an interesting place. If you want to know about niche fashion, it's niche music. Super bloody niche. And we used to call that the long tail.
Totally.
So niche is the new mass, particularly in that category. Because and the algorithm that's amazing about that platform is that it just learns the stuff that you're either shocked by or intrigued by and gives you more of that.
Yeah.
Which means it's giving you more niche. So it's this kind of cycle. So what I think is interesting, if you use those tools for what they are, which is it's already got the mass, then how do you make sure you're tuning the creativity for this thing that we probably need to measure, which is engagement more so.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And not just engagement, then value. And with value comes what? An alignment. With alignment comes what? It comes this commitment to a brand. And so if somebody else comes along and says, can you look at me because I think there's more brands going to be launched than ever before, you're going to say no because I understand what this value is. What's yours? It takes a lot of room to sort of carve into that psyche.
Yeah, I think just really quickly to the point on TikTok being niche, I think that's so true. And I think what it's capturing and why it's grown so fast is we're all an amalgamation of different niches. Like I'm not just a 35 to 50-year-old woman that living in New York City put a targeting group on me and start pushing ads towards me, right? Like I'm an amalgamation of like, I like comedy, I like this, I like that, and all these things come together and it creates a fuller picture of who we are. And I think digital has done a really poor job of seeing people as individuals. So I love the niche.
Niche is the new mass. I'm telling you, man, it has proven itself every single time. When you think about niche blogs back in the day, probably 20 years ago, I'm aging myself now, but it happened. Yeah. And you have these verticals. Now you've got these vertical splinters within a platform that allows you to homogenize the content so you know what you're going to get. It's not going to be more than 2 minutes. Yeah. These other platforms you just have to read. So anyway, I think PR is going to be much stronger than it ever has. I think it's very important for that to happen.
Interesting.
I think advertising as a form is going to sort of pull back from some of this mass media, obvious types of tent poles, I would call them. I think that's going to sort of take a backseat to that as well because there seems to be a lot of wastage around that space. And it's going to be more direct. So direct, because people can understand how it converts, but that's not sexy. No. But it has to be discussed. So the sexy part of it can layer on top of it. So you have 2 types of creative. You'll have performance media as always, and you'll have this stuff that, is all about the DNA and story and, it's more languid and lovely. And those 2 creatives will never meet in a dark alley. And they shouldn't. They have different purposes. Totally. Where today it's just boom, splash it as much as we can, hope to God it works, and when it doesn't, cover your ass. Right. So it's bad patterns are happened. And when you look at, large push for technology to be front and center, there's this kind of immersive technologies that are grounding us to become more 5 senses, all encapsulated all at once. I mean, there's the theories of ecosystems. We're a wearable that connects to the fitness goals that I'm having, that's connected to my kitchen, which understands the food I'm consuming. It's going to make recommendations based on the types of foods that I'm buying to hit my fitness goals, and this whole ecosystem of my life is available to us today, but very few of us have actually implemented it. And the reason for that is there's this other thing that we can never guess, which is happenstance. We kind of like the idea of happenstance. Absolutely. It's like if you always just stay in one genre, punk never gets invented because we just listen to rock and roll. Totally. When you get tired of that, that's when these breakouts happen, and I think we're right there. Yeah. And I also think that it's interesting because there's always this focus to see a couple of darling brands do it really, really well, but they end up doing it well in 1 or 2 places, not everywhere. Nobody does great everywhere. That's called mass media. And I think that the forms of those things we've seen in the past are going away.
So is mass media going away?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. It's just another channel. It'll
Yeah.
remain a channel.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't think it'll have this cut through where
Yeah.
you're like, hey, take all the channels with this one idea, run across all of them
Right.
in different forms.
Right.
That's where the mass media comes into place. What'll happen is you'll have something that says, holy crap, that platform seems to be the best for us.
Right.
Who knew it was going to be LinkedIn?
Yeah.
And you end up throwing an arrow into that thing.
Right.
I don't think we've really understood what these peaks and valleys look like.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just kind of, let's look at the whole thing, and suddenly it's like, well, it's 200 million impressions, and wasn't that incredible in media? Was it?
I have no idea.
And
Nobody
you
has
don't.
any idea.
Right. And the real truth to that is attribution.
Right.
One of the hardest things to measure is what the hell is it doing for your brand?
Right.
Brands are doing amazing. I think in the last 12 months, the brand that I watched, apart from their hiccup with Yeezy, which clearly was not on them, was Adidas. Mm-hmm. They entered the metaverse in a way that's very, very authentic. Mm-hmm. Because and there's a terrible word, but the truth about authenticity for them as a brand.
Yeah.
So back in the 90s, they did it with Run DMC. These kids turned up with some sneakers on, bounced around stages in New York, and this German brand didn't understand what the hell it was. They came out and checked them out and thought, oh, this isn't a spoof. This hip-hop culture's totally into our brand, dude. We're obviously going to be a streetwear brand. Mm-hmm. And they've done the same thing in the metaverse. They didn't create Adidas in the metaverse. People picked it up.
Right.
The cybers picked it up and said, this is us.
Right.
We're using your brand as a tool. And they're like, great, let's get behind it.
Yeah.
Left Nike in the dust when it comes to that. When you talk about metaverse, for example, nobody talks about Nike. Everybody talks about Adidas.
Yeah.
And when you talk about social channels that do it really well, brands that do it great, they typically have these ambassadors that embody the brand and can speak to authenticity. There's authenticity. They go straight to the camera and speak down the barrel and do things that brands have never done, even if they're luxury. And so these darlings in the D2C space have another challenge because they're told the scale. And now they've fallen into the trap of feeling like an old brand because they have to go back to all the mass media, try and figure out how to do that well. But the other brands have already done that well. So it's this there's this juggling dichotomy of what's the right method.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, do you think there'd be a point where a brand has its always on performance sort of, CPA, CPC, CPM sort of model, and then they have sort of more niche activations at the top where maybe it's just one small thing that they're doing in the metaverse or one small pop-up shop that they're doing that's selling like limited edition sneakers that you can, whatever it might be. Does it become a niche mass sort of play in that way?
I think it does. And it has to because it rationalizes the budget, which means it's very inexpensive to touch those audiences. And if you do it at a frequency that reminds them of your brand, that's kind of the subconsciousness.
Yeah.
To the front of the consciousness, which is if you tap into their values and their emotion in the right channels, then
Yeah.
But it could be a billboard.
Yeah.
It
Totally.
could be direct marketing.
It could be a piece of mail.
Print.
Yeah.
There's a number of these different medias that touch people in different ways. So I think you kind of have to do it. Mm-hmm. But we're sort of supporting a more and more. Mm-hmm. More is more mentality, particularly when it comes to social.
Yeah.
I think that the audit across social has to be done.
Yeah.
Some of it's happening in front of us already anyway, because the advertisers that are kind of walking away from the blue bird is fascinating to see that they don't want to be around something that's a hot mess until it figures itself out. But brands can do that, man. They can they go with the flow of what's interesting.
Yeah.
Most of them do not understand the channels. And so they're still sitting here thinking, I'm not quite sure what I need to do here. Mm-hmm. But
so is there an opportunity for somebody to come in and audit social and help brands figure out how do they leverage it and how do they design for it and create for it in a way that makes sense?
And it would be great if that's on a holistic.
Yeah.
It happens channel by channel by channel today, and then when you try and rationalize that whole thing up, it's really hard to balance that when you add all the other media types to it as well.
So what's your advice for brands then that are struggling with this?
Find out determine what your KPIs are, and I think that needs to be redefined. So the old KPIs of yesteryear all need to be thrown out, and we need to start over and say, what are we trying to do here?
Right.
Is the media, meaning the sound, sight, and motion that we're creating, what is its design?
Right.
Is it to sell stuff? Great, we've got DR channels to do that. Is it to create emotion so people can actually align to our brand, and over time they'll make that purchase decision because there's more competitors in that space?
Yeah.
What's the value you're looking for? Is it brand love? Is it sentient? Is it comments? Are you trying to create a stir? Are who knows? It could be their best performing channel. It could be Reddit.
Yeah.
It could be Quora. It could be, who knows?
Right.
I just think, there are conversations happening for brands that brands aren't participating in.
Yeah.
So how do they participate in a way that feels like we're there to support the channel and not to go against the channel? I think It's kind of just a fascinating time.
Yeah, I think it is too. I think it'll be really interesting to see what this year brings, if there are more controls in place, if there's more. I think sometimes when you have like limiting factors and you don't have unlimited budgets, for example, it can lead to more creativity because you have to be like, well, what could I do with that money that I got cut from my budget? What could I do to still be impactful, even though I don't have a ton of cash to throw at this?
Or if I'm going to go from 20 channels to 5, what can I do in those 5 channels that make them feel like they're either collective or standalone and different? As opposed to I have 20 channels, I have the ability to create all this creative to go across it. I don't know if it all performs well. Some of it may, some of it may not.
Yeah.
I think when you create restriction, you create an opportunity for creativity to be even more important, particularly when all this technology is creeping up and saying, the technology can do it better than you, the creative.
Yeah.
It means the creative has to turn around and say, what does it mean for me?
Yeah.
So how do I do it that it doesn't feel like it's homogenized? It doesn't feel like it's of the channel. How do I make it feel really unique?
Yeah.
Because it's, look, if it's all shortcut language, that's fine.
Yeah.
And that's great for that sort of tonnage idea. But holy crap, we have to get much better with creativity moving forward then. And look at some of the really sparky ideas that happened that were really like a head scratcher. Burberry did this incredible one called Open Air, I think it was. But, people just went out and floated in the fields. And that was an incredible piece of work because it was a total head scratcher. But what it really was it's what people needed. It made you feel like you could exhale. It made you feel like you could actually go outside even though you're stuck inside. It actually spoke to the culture that was needed.
Yeah.
It was nothing to do with Burberry.
Yeah.
Or if you look at, incredible kind of these empathetic, feels like they just align perfectly with you, experiences that just say, wow, I didn't realize you could get to your brand that way. I mean, when Adele launched her album with these little snippets that came out, it wasn't, I think a lot of people got to Adele by the people that were actually covering her.
Yeah.
And ultimately come back to say, this lady's an incredible songwriter.
Yeah.
You should probably understand who originated the song.
Right.
But the remix of that was the thing that made it popular, which is also another fascinating thing.
Yeah.
So remix culture.
Yeah.
If you look at what happened with Elton John, he's probably, if I look at Elton John, I mean, my God, he's had like 10 farewell concerts.
I know.
I remember he was one of my first concerts I saw when I was a kid. I caught a bus from Armidale down to Sydney. I camped out to watch that guy play 2 sets. He came on Top and Tails with a big wig and did a white piano thingy, symphony.
Yeah.
And, goes off stage for 20 minutes, comes back in a rock outfit and did part 2. So it was an incredible gig. But I bring him up to say that while everybody's kind of either being sued and kicked around by remixing, because we're part of a remix culture, that's a period where we are right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's so smart because he's gone through his catalogue and remixing his own music.
I know.
He
really
owns
good.
it.
And adding cool young stars to it.
And it's his music, so he doesn't have to worry about royalty issues. He doesn't have to worry about copyright. It's bloody his.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's genius move.
Totally. I mean, we don't have to use this, but Brad and I both do improv comedy.
Right.
And I just feel like that. I love your thoughts on it, but I think we're on the edge of like a creative and artistic renaissance. I don't know if it's because of the pandemic. I don't know if I would even want to like blame it on that, but I just feel like things died, and just like in a forest when like there's a forest fire and things die and then there's like regrowth that comes up from that. Like I feel like we're on the edge of like a massive renaissance potentially. I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, well look, I think renaissance is definitely the right term for it because everyone's a polymath.
Yeah.
So previously, and I would say prior to a pause, you work and you play.
Yeah.
And those things got pretty linear.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my God. Especially because everything's just got jammed up now. But when you went to work and then you were at work and then you went home and then you play.
And you're exhausted from work, so you're doing what you feel is your version of work.
Right.
The truth is, because you take a moment to say, what else am I interested in?
Right.
Your aperture opened up because the camera now has the ability to say, I'm not looking like this with tunnel vision where I was just this duality.
Yes.
I'm really, really, really interested. So, you said you're interested in comedy. That's one thing. You're probably deeply interested in music and food and all the things that you think you're interested in. And you've probably outsourced the ability to contribute to those.
Totally.
Maybe that's through film and other shit that we absorb.
Yes.
But now you can participate.
I know.
And so I think it's definitely the time to be the polymath.
Yeah.
Particularly if all of these technologies coming to shorten our ability to have to do things and we're in a more automated experience.
Yeah.
It allows you to have that freedom to make sure that you can participate.
Yes.
You know, as a polymath, as multiple interests now, you have the ability to participate in them. And part of it also is that these channels of expression and things that you follow in that new niche as the new mass, it gives you permission to do it.
Yeah.
Because if you want to learn to play piano, you can probably do it without having a piano teacher.
Yes.
Or
you get interested enough to hire that piano teacher, and you have the time now because you don't have to do 2 hours of commuting to play piano.
But you've also spent months learning it by yourself to understand you actually do give a shit about it. To actually learn that tool.
Yes.
And so I think that there's many opportunities to do it. And a lot of them also shortcut. So if you're interested in animation, you can create animation tools today, which is great because it allows you as a creator, as a new, naive creator, come into these tools and feel like you're expressing really quickly without having to go back to university for 4 years to learn the craft of CGI, for example.
Yeah, totally.
So there's a real positive to it.
Yes.
And there is some negative to it.
Yes.
But I see it net as a massive positive.
Yeah. Although I do kind of want to go back to university for acting school and just do it for 4 years and just be like,
well, that's because
I'm a student again.
Well, that's also because you're interested in it enough. You've gone deep enough in it that you think you could go really deep in it.
Yes. That's
and
true.
So you're not going.
And I want to absorb all of it and like suck it all up. And so I think it would be so cool to go back to school to do it.
And then ultimately, when you come out of that thing, 4 years of doing all of it, you may say, yes, comedy is actually the genre that I really care about.
Yeah.
But now you actually have a different way of actually expressing it.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you've got these tools. It's craft. It's
Yes.
all down to craft.
Yes.
And so that's why I think I'm a massive advocate for, it's not panic mode. It's let's understand how creativity can be way better than ever before.
Yeah.
Because we've got these platforms of expression that understand what those niches look like.
Yes.
And so how do we reset the goals of the types of creativity we're producing to make sure we're excelling the brand, but at the same time creating something that's really unique because we're told that the machine is smarter than us, so let's outsmart the machine.
Yeah, I love it. Is everybody creative?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And also creativity is it's teachable.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think we all have it. We all just like put it away when we got into our teenage years and college university years, and you had to like pick a major, and then you had to decide like, okay, I guess that's my thing now, and I do this now, and so you kind of stuff it in the corner, and then I guess it just bubbles back up to the surface.
But that's also just that's a pure reflection of the way that we categorize creativity.
Yes.
And you've just gone down the left and the right.
Yes, exactly. I did it again. I was binary with it again.
Yeah. Biology, math, science, all of these things.
Totally.
Are not creative. Well, I would disagree with that.
Yeah.
And I would say the things that we think are creative, PE, music, blah, blah. Yeah, that's an obvious expression of creativity. Both of them blended. Creativity is at the heart of all of that.
Yeah. I love that. Thanks for joining me. Yeah.
Ripper.
Cool. You good?
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.